What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. Thank you for being here. We're talking Judaism 101, and this comes as Jews are about to celebrate Yom Kippur, and we're happy to have with us Eric Stillman, Executive Director of the Jewish Foundation and Jewish Federation of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So I want to talk broadly about Judaism, but first let's talk about Yom Kippur. It's coming up this month. What is that? Give us Yom Kippur 101.
Sure. That roughly translates to Day of Atonement. And at the start of the Jewish New Year, which we just began with the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, we then enter into a period of introspection and reflection during which we seek forgiveness. We ask others who we may have harmed to forgive us for what we may have done to hurt them. And we seek for God to inscribe us in the book of life for another year. And on the Day of Atonement, we fast for 25 hours in order to help focus us on that introspection, on that inward look. And so at the conclusion of Yom Kippur, we believe that we have been inscribed for a good year, another year in the book of life, and then we essentially start the cycle of the year all the way again until the next Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which will come in the fall of the following year.
So it's a Day of Atonement, and in this day you fast, and you look back on the year or on your entire life. What would you say? You look back on the year that you've just had, or all of your life?
Primarily the idea is the past year, on the belief that one is following this practice each year. I certainly, though, believe, and I could say for myself as well as I imagine for other people of the Jewish faith, that thoughts and reflections that go back well beyond 1 year throughout my life enter into my thoughts, enter into my introspection, and that it is a chance to take stock in many senses of not just the year that's passed, but the life of a whole.
And is this a day you take off work, generally? You don't go to work?
Correct.
And fast. Is there a big misconception that people may have? Say your non-Jewish friends, you're telling them it's Yom Kippur. Is there a misconception that people have?
I imagine that there probably are some misconceptions. I believe that the idea of fasting for 25 hours for some people might seem a little extreme or a little hard to imagine. However, for most people, it does work in terms of after a while, you sort of don't think about the hunger pangs and you begin to really focus inward and begin to really reflect and think about your life, your relationship to other people, your relationship to God. And so in that sense, even though there certainly are periods where people get hungry or people have trouble concentrating because they're fasting, those hunger pangs usually do kind of subside and people begin to be able to shift their focus.
The origin of Yom Kippur, what is the origin?
So in the Bible, the original 5 books of Moses in the Torah, that we are commanded to observe a day of fasting. And so the very idea of observing this holiday has biblical roots.
Mm-hmm. So let's expand it out in our discussion. So just Judaism in general, Judaism 101. What are some of the biggest questions you are asked about the Jewish faith from people here in Nashville that aren't part of the Jewish faith? What are some of the biggest questions or maybe even misconceptions that people might have?
So a lot of times people who are meeting me, and they may not have met somebody else who's Jewish previously, are interested, they're curious, and they want to understand somewhat about the Jewish faith, about Jewish practices, about the relationship between the Jewish people and the non-Jewish community, as well as a relationship between the Jewish people here in the United States and with Israel, and as well a sense of how does the Jewish faith relate to the Christian faith, which is the most widely observed faith in our country.
Mm-hmm. So I looked up 13 principles of Jewish faith. God exists. What I guess go through some principles that you think are primary in the Jewish faith. Number one, God exists.
Well, for sure, God exists, and as many of our listeners may be aware, there are some major monotheistic religions, or those religions in the world that only believe there is one God. And Judaism and Christianity are two examples of that. There certainly are other faiths as well. And because of that relationship to one God, the modern versions of Judaism or Christianity as we know them today are distinguished from other faiths where they may have multiple gods and that they may be praying to different gods for different purposes. And so certainly in Judaism there's one God, and all prayer is directed toward that one God.
Prayer is very important. Prayer is to be directed to God alone.
Yes.
The Messiah will come. That's what this says. But what about the relationship there? The relationship between the Jewish faith and Jesus, and I guess a future Messiah.
So I think that's one of the great unknowns, and philosophers and theologians and people of faith throughout the world have often posed the question whether the Messiah has come and will come again, which is the Christian belief, or that the Messiah has yet to come, and that is the Jewish faith. And so in that sense, whether the person who I'm talking to, the person on the street, the people I meet, when they ask, well, how do I know whether when the Messiah arrives, will this be the first time or the second time? And I don't know whether I'll be alive at that point in time to be able to find out in person. I don't think anybody really will know until that occurs, and whether that's the end of days or however one wishes to phrase it, that is a future unknown that anyone who's alive will find out at that time.
And so what is the Jewish relationship to Christ?
So the Jewish faith does not recognize Jesus as a savior or as the Son of God. Most of the readings and understandings that I've been taught are an acknowledgement that Jesus existed, he lived and died as a Jew, and that it was only after his death that he was looked at as Christ the Savior. And so therefore the Jewish people regard Jesus as a man, someone who did live. There's really no question that he lived. What his role was on earth and what his role is to Christianity differs in that sense from how Judaism views him.
Certainly that's the biggest difference between Christianity and Judaism. But there are many similarities, right? The first books of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so go through some of those. What are some of the great similarities of the two faiths?
Well, I think you point out very clearly the first 5 books of the Bible, which in the Jewish faith are referred to as the 5 books of Moses or the Torah, are filled with biblical stories and biblical lessons which are shared by both Christianity and Judaism in terms of their understanding. And though their interpretations may differ, the story, whether it be Noah and the flood, as an example, would be, or the giving of the 10 Commandments. There are certain very central stories of both traditions which, as I understand, are taught and are told within both faith traditions. and that I feel there are, in that sense, there are a lot of ways in which Judaism and Christianity have a similar frame of reference within those passages in the Bible, how they're interpreted and what later portions are considered part of the Bible, and which portions are additional stories that are included, do differ from one faith to the other.
And I guess the essence of worship, it's obviously to God. There's a lot of we need to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. Is that right? It's a lot about the work that we do here on earth while we are alive. Is that right? And I guess
yes.
talk about that.
Sure.
How does that manifest itself?
So there's a principle within Judaism, and in Hebrew the words are tikkun olam, which roughly translates to repair the world, and that we have an obligation during our lifetimes to actively participate in helping to make the world a better place. And I believe that that is something which many faiths embrace, and that can be a common rallying point and a common shared concern and interest among people of many different faiths, and of course those who may not have any faith who yet believe that that is a moral and ethical responsibility. So in that regard, there are a lot of commonalities in which Judaism, Christianity, people of other faiths, and as I say, people without a particular faith who believe making the world a better place is something that is incumbent upon us, and that we have a responsibility to do so. And I've seen some wonderful examples. The Jewish Federation, working with our 5 Jewish congregations and other faiths, have participated in a variety of activities, as I refer to them, under the description of tikkun olam, or repairing the world. And it's helping those who are less fortunate around us, and making sure that we help to try and lift up others within our society who are struggling, people who are in need, and that need could be financial, that need could be emotional or spiritual. And I think that all of those are important, wonderful examples of how we can be the better versions of ourselves when we do that to care for our fellow men and women.
And so as we approach Yom Kippur and this Day of Atonement, when we look back on the past year and evaluate ourselves, I guess, is that a big part of the evaluation? Is it what have we done, what have I done to make the world a better place, to help those? Is that a big part of what the examination is on this Day of Atonement?
In a sense, it's actually even more specific to particular individuals. Have I, in my encounters with other human beings, done all that I could do to be of assistance to them? And have I expressed my gratitude for the ways in which those other individuals may have helped me? Is there anyone whose forgiveness I need to seek because I did not respond in a way in which I showed my better self to that person? And likewise, if somebody comes to me and asks for forgiveness for an act that that person may have done, which may have been harmful to me in some way, while I'm not obligated to forgive the person, it is a way for me to be my better self if I can find it within me to forgive the other person for whatever wrong or hurt that that person may have done toward me.
So we're going to take a break. Then I want to come back and ask, what happens when we die? So think about that. That's a big deal. All right, so we'll take a break. Be back right after this.